So at this point, we'll enter the actual text. And the first part of the text is self-cultivation, becoming a complete human being. This is the very foundational teachings of what Zhugeling is trying to point to, what his voice is really saying, what his heart is actually bringing out that is helpful for us as leaders living in kind of a crazy world. And the first two of self-cultivation or becoming a complete person are nourishing the original nature and cultivating virtue. And then the third is always learning, which Jane will talk about. And these three are really the 10 pegs of these teachings. If we can come back to reflecting on these three, how do we nourish innate goodness? How do we cultivate virtue? And how do we always learn? How do we bring ourselves to always having that intention? We then have a really solid foundation of working with the teachings that build on this from Zhugeling, who always lived a contemplative life, even when he was in public office. He always came back to his farm. He only had one wife and one son, whereas many of the leaders of the time had many wives, many children. He always came back to a simple life. So these are some of the aspects of nourishing the original nature, and we'll look into these at this point as a way of reviewing. This path is called the bright path, and it's a path of virtue in the sense of big V, which is really following the Tao, or the natural order of things, or we could say yin and yang, coming together, always circling throughout experience, the dark, the receptive, and the light, and the active or creative. These are always coming, circling back among each other, and this is part of the Tao. So walking with this is cultivating our goodness, cultivating the innate goodness that we have. And it's a quality of how we do our job more than just the job of leadership. It's how we cultivate from the inside, so that naturally what arises is this ability to know ourselves and others in the environment and act from that, rather than acting from any kind of agenda or personal idea of what should happen, or from the fogginess of discursiveness. So we cultivate, in the bright path, there's 6 qualities of self-cultivation. Those 6 qualities, again, are in the workbook that you have or will be getting, but I'll go over them briefly with an emphasis on one aspect of looking at this. The 6 are simplicity, humility, illuminating vision, stillness, inner peace, and vast view. So simplicity is really this quality of being a hermit in a way. It means contentment. It means not being anxious over loss and gain. It's a simple life. Humility is opening and knowing our limits. This quality of opening to hear the truth and allowing the truth to open us further. It's also the quality of always learning. So these two in particular, simplicity and humility, result in a bright or illumined path, an illuminated vision. It's called illuminating vision, which is basically the light's turned on. We have a light that is turned on. It's not dim. It's in contrast to a vision that is a vision that's dimmed by pettiness, by distractions, by complexity, or maybe we could say overthinking. Another way of thinking about this is that we have a star to steer by. We have a star to steer by, and we can always come back to that.
Why am I interested? Why am I curious? Some of the biggest obstacles to learning, and I'm laughing because I've been really examining these lately for myself, and I realize that there's this little corner of me that is really kind of stubborn around certain subjects. And I think I might know more than I really do about those subjects. And I realize that it has been a real obstacle to me, thinking I knew better. And that's one of the biggest obstacles to learning, is really a kind of arrogance, a kind of stubbornness that really believes we know better. Anybody seen any of that around these days? Anybody have an experience of either that for themselves? I'm not going to name names. You can see who's pointing to themselves on the screen. But I think it's really good. Like, I found it's almost a bodily experience, right? You sort of can feel yourself tightening up and shutting down to being curious and really interested in what somebody else has to say that you think you might know better. That's a big one. Laziness is another one, where we just kind of dread the work that it might take to learn something. And I have to say, hermeneutics might be that for some of you, but it isn't really hard work. It's just a kind of consistency. So it's some kind of perseverance that goes on, rather than just being too lazy to actually dig into this material. Or being impatient, kind of irritated and frustrated. And again, these are in your workbook, so you don't need to worry about capturing them. That sense of, let's just keep moving here, and I don't have time to learn this. Or has anybody had that experience where you pass a situation and you had like a flash of a thought, oh, I should ask somebody about this, and you keep moving? And then later on it haunts you, like you really should have asked those questions. You really should have engaged with that situation at that moment. We're just moving too fast, or we're impatient and we want to move on. So again, I just encourage to really think about, why are you interested in this material? What inspires you about it? And curiosity feeds on itself. And so if one becomes sort of curious about one's world, then it can increase your curiosity through that inspiration. And I think you'll find your leadership, again, people will feel that too. Relational leaders are more effective because people feel their interest in them. They really feel that somebody wants to hear what they have to offer. As Suzanne mentioned, not just anything, but when somebody really comes to the table with something that matters enough for them to want to offer it into the situation, it's so important to be genuinely interested. Not just patronizing in the sense, well, I'd like to hear your opinion, but that sense of really examining about yourself to realize that you care enough and you really are genuinely interested in hearing what they have to say. People will feel that. It's a very different kind of leadership than just a sort of throwaway, or I've got all the right answers. I don't think anybody in this group would go that direction, but just a reinforcement for that. So that's always learning, which is the third way, again, of self-cultivation. So we've got nourishing your original nature, your sort of natural goodness, and then really cultivating virtue, big V and little v. And then we have always learning. And these are three subjects that you never separate yourself from. You're always working with these three on this path of really leading from the inside out.